Yes, Saloni. Unmute, please.
Life is challenging and unpredictable, but we cannot afford to stay in our comfort zone to be ready to face anything. It remains to be seen whether we will learn or how we transform ourselves from what nature is trying to teach us. The pandemic has been a great teacher. We grew better at listening, not assuming that everyone's realities are the same, and focusing on things that truly mattered above all. So, what matters above all is having dialogues and experience sharing sessions to delve deeper into the repercussions of COVID, to lead the world out of and beyond COVID purposefully. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Saloni Sinha, Faculty of Communication and Theatre from BIMTech Greater Noida, a leading B school. We're welcoming you all on behalf of IIM Nagpur to the ISDSI Global Talk Series on the theme Management Education 2021 to 2035 Reflections and Disruption. This is being hosted by ASMA and the academic partners at Symbiosis Institute of Business Management Hyderabad and BIMTech Greater Noida. Today's event is a precursor to the ISDSI Global Conference 2021, which will be on leading business in a fluid world, which is to be hosted by Nagpur later this year. The next few hours are dedicated to deliberations from eminent speakers who will look at the lessons learned from the disruptive era of the pandemic. Together, the aim is to chart out the future of management education, where innovation, adaptability, and agility came into focus. So the series will include opening address by industry stalwarts like Mr. Shiva Kumar, and we also have Mr. Kiran Karnik here, Dr. Bhimaraya Metri himself, who is the founding president of ISDSI Global. And it will be moderated by Dr. Arun Elias, who is Associate Dean, International Accreditation, Victoria University of Wellington, and also the Vice President, Australasia region of ISDSI Global. Uh, I'm sure you all are waiting to get enriched on various aspects that touched and affected management education. So we're looking at the era of disruption and how it evolved, how adopting universal principle for a globalized economy is going to be a real reality, upgrading of infrastructure, demands of innovative pedagogy, competitive education, and the trends, lessons, as well as outlook. Next few hours are going to be amazing. And ASMA is key host here. So therefore, I now invite Mr. Rahul Jain, Managing Director, Inner Serve Group, to deliver his welcome note.
Thank you so much, Professor Saloni Sinha. I am indeed so honored to be in the presence of such a stalwarts here. And I'm really thrilled to welcome you all to this very special event today. IIM Nagpur presents ISDSI Global Talk Series on Management Education 2021 to 2035. Today's event on management education, reflections and looking forward will take a contemplative
Looks like we lost him.
Hello, sorry, I lost my network. So today's event on management education, 2020 to 2035, reflections and disruptions, will take a contemplative look at the past year's disruption in an effort to chart a way forward for management institutions as they embrace a future where agility, fluidity, sustainability are the prerequisites to survival. Amongst us, we have the stalwarts of the management education as well as the practitioners. We are all here to learn, and I'm proud that ASMA is given this opportunity to host this series of 5 events, whereby each month will bring the best of the management education and the practitioner side together to discuss various aspects of education fraternity. With this, I welcome you all, and I take once again phenomenal pride to host this series. And I'm sure we all will look up to the big event in December at IIM Nagpur. Thank you so much. Over to you, Professor
Thank
Saloni.
you, Mr. Rahul Jain. And I'm sure everybody is very curious to know more about ISDSI Global. And it's an honor for me to invite Dr. Ravi Kumar Jain, Director, SIBM Hyderabad, who's also the Secretary General of ISDSI. So, sir, please let us know about this forum and its vision.
Thank you, Saloni. Eminent speakers of the day, Shri Kiran Karnik ji, Shri Shiva Kumar ji, Professor Metri, Professor Arun Elias, friends, colleagues, and students who have joined us from across the country for this webinar today, which is the first webinar in the series of 5 webinars that we are organizing as a run-up to the mega conference. Perhaps would be Asia's biggest conference, where 30 countries have already pledged to participate and expected 1,000 participants. ISDSI Global is perhaps the first international forum headquartered in India, powered by Indians. This is also in line with what holds for India and what India would be for the world in future. ISDSI Global is going to bring you a mega conference hosted by IIM Nagpur with a co-host of Victoria University, Australia, co-chaired by Arun Elias, Professor Arun Elias, and Tennessee Tech University in USA, co-chaired by Professor Nat Natarajan. The theme is on managing in fluid world, as the world is becoming more fluid in all respects. And I recall one of the talks given by Shivji in IMA forum, where he actually mentioned about how the structures and constructs are melting and how there is a need to rethink every aspect of business, and business management education has to fall in line. This webinar series, as I said, is a run-up to the conference, which is going to handle larger issues in much bigger scale. These webinars, which are going to be having eminent speakers from across the world and also from different walks of life, is going to look at or strike conversations from the future of management education to every aspect of program structure to program delivery, structural issues of business schools, policy frameworks both at global and local level, whether they're amenable to absorb and foster innovation and internationalization. So every aspect of management education and business management would be captured. ISDSI Global takes pride in being the Indian forum for the world. And we thank Kiran Karnik ji and Shiva Kumar ji for gracing today's webinar as eminent speakers to make a beginning or flag off the initiative of ISDSI Global. And ISDSI Global truly aspires to what India would be in future, reflect the future of India or the India in future. Thank you so much. Saloni, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. As a management faculty myself, I'm really looking forward to these dialogues, and we set to grow further with a global perspective. And Indian education has a very, very strong future ahead and a very compelling position in our globe, I'm sure, with your efforts. This is the time to actually introduce our eminent guests of the day so that we can take ahead the panel for which we are here today. It's an immense honor for me to introduce people like Dr. Shiva Kumar and Mr. Kiran Karnik. So I'll take a few minutes to let you all know who they are. I'm sure everybody knows them, but still I'll take this formal introduction and then hand it over to the moderator of the day. Mr. Kiran Karnik, who is also the former president of NASSCOM, is a non-academic with a strong interest in public policy and strategy. And nowadays, he spends most of his time with educational and civil society organizations. So, are we not very fortunate to have him here? Thank you so much, Kiran sir, for giving your time for such pursuits. And he describes himself as a public non-intellectual. He recently published a book, Decisive Decade India 2030 Gazelle Report, wherein he seeks to understand where India will be by 2030. And therefore, you know for sure why he's here and what we are set to gain. In his book, he has focused on 9 crucial areas to figure out very, very important things on democracy and politics, security, health, education, economy, demography, society, jobs, and livelihoods and technology. Welcome, Mr. Karnik, to this forum. Some people will remember 2020, but most people will want to forget it. Is 2021 a reference year? These are the quotable quotes of our next eminent speaker, Mr. Shiva Kumar. And this is what I found in his article, which was published in Business Line in the month of December 2020. And he, in that book, has put forward 5 thoughts for 2021. And I'm sure it will be a part of his discussion today as well. We are very privileged to host him today. And I think at BIMTech, I was very lucky to host him as the valedictory speaker, in which his book, The Right Choice, was also released in the BIMTech Business Literature Festival. And that book has actually shown us a lot of things in the way forward. He's the Group Executive President, Corporate Strategy and Business at Aditya Birla Group. And as an alumnus of the IIT Madras and IIM Kolkata and the Wharton School, again, I think we could not have had a better speaker in this forum. Thank you so much, Mr. Shivakumar, for joining in today. In today's world, this is something which we have learned from the leadership sitting over here as a third speaker. The workforce continuously needs to learn, unlearn, and relearn. In future of work, by the time a student graduates, they need to be ready for unborn roles and in unborn companies. These are the words of our third speaker of the session, who's also the visionary behind this forum, Dr. Bhimaraya Metri, Director, IIM Nagpur, and the founding president of ISDSI Global. He's been steering the management education with his insights about the paradigm shift from VUCA to a fluid world. Thank you so much, sir, for starting such a beautiful initiative. We will definitely grow much, much bigger, and we will have a compelling position in the education sector across the globe. The panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Arun Elias, and he's the Associate Dean, International and Accreditation with the Wellington School of Business and Government, Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. He's been associated with this university and has amazing experience in the field of management, as well as engineering and technology, consulting, teaching, research. And with that kind of experience, he's going to be definitely the apt moderator of today's session. Sir is also the Vice President of the Australasia region of ISDSI Global. So ladies and gentlemen, lend them your ears. We are all set to begin the panel talk on Management Education 2021 to 2035, Reflections and Disruptions. Over to you, Dr. Elias.
Thank you very much, Professor Salome. It is my pleasure to introduce the topic for today's webinar. By the way, good afternoon, Indian subcontinent. It's good afternoon also for the African area. Good evening, Australasia. It's almost going to be midnight here. And good morning for the Americas who are joining from the American region. So fantastic to have you all. In terms of the webinar, the topic today, it's about management education 2021 to 2035, reflections and disruptions. Now, management education, in my opinion, has been disrupted much before COVID came in, and it should be disrupted. And it is time to discuss this in 2021. Why? I think we are almost 140 years. Actually, we are 140 years since 1881, when the first management education or the formal management education, so-called, started in Wharton in 1881. So 140 years, time to think how it has evolved, how it will evolve. I think it's time to have this discussion. And that's why we have the three eminent panelists, three eminent speakers today, as Professor Salome introduced, Mr. D. Shivakumar, Mr. Kiran Karnik, and Professor Bhimaraya Metri. So without losing any time, let me welcome the first speaker, Mr. Shiva Kumar, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's absolutely amazing to see a lot of friends on this call. Dr. Kiran Karnik, Dr. Karnik and I overlapped on the IIM Ahmedabad board for 5 years. Wonderful to see you, Kiran. Dr. Metri, of course, an old friend from IIM Trichy, and Arun, Elias, as well as ISDSI. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I'll set out with maybe just about 3-4 minutes in terms of laying out who the consumer of a business school is, what does the consumer expect, and what is the current context in which we are discussing this, and then what every B school really should have. And then I'll come back later in terms of talking about the impact of pandemic and the impact of digitization on the whole concept of a business school. So if you ask anybody, why do you do an MBA? If you ask that question to anybody who writes an exam, whatever it is, a GMAT, a SAT, a ZAT, whatever it is, why do you write an exam to get into a business school? Believe it or not, the number one reason for many years, not just today, has been money, because people want to improve their financial position. That's the reason people want to do an MBA. Next, an MBA does not come easy. Today in India, 70% of students, and that's true even in America, which is another big area of management schools. In India today, 70% of students take a loan to do an MBA. So which means people have a big hope on the degree to say, I will earn more than what I'm earning today, or I'll improve my lot, and I'm willing to take an education loan in order to do an MBA. That is the consumer we are talking about. So if money is the issue, unfortunately today, thanks to the pandemic, capitalism is under fire. Almost every single society has mixed socialism with capitalism. We've seen huge stimulus packages. And it's fundamentally so because inequality has gone up. About 150 million people have been added to the poverty line. So people are just worried that capitalism minus competition is actually becoming exploitation. So everybody is talking about responsible capitalism, or everybody is talking about equitable capitalism. I don't know if these are oxymorons, which will ever happen. But at least there's a growing consciousness and a growing body of knowledge to say, hey, the current system of capitalism and money might not be the right way forward, which is at least a good start. And finally, my opening thought would be on what does a great business school rest on? A great business school rests on 4 things in my book. Number 1, the quality of students. The intake of students is very important. Where you cut off, the type of students, the diversity of the students, the inclusivity of the students on campus. So number 1 is the quality of students. Number 2 is the presence of rockstar faculty. You look at the history of business schools anywhere in the world. Peter Drucker was at Santa Clara. Michael Porter, Nitin Noria, Clayton Christensen were at Harvard. Philip Kotler, Bala Balachandran were at Kellogg's. So each of these big time professors, C.K. Prahlad was at Michigan. Each of these rockstar faculty attract other faculty, attract institutions, attract students. So rockstar faculty is very important for the success of a business school. Third is the experience in the business school. The experience for the students comes in the interaction with the faculty, in the interaction amongst themselves, and the interaction with the industry experts who come to campus. Okay, so that's the experience which people value. And I'll talk next when I come back later in terms of how that experience is going to change in a digital world. And final reason, 4th reason for a business school to be successful is the type of companies who come in to recruit from that campus and the consistency with which they come in. These are the 4 reasons why a business school is successful today. And I believe the fundamental tenets of these 4 will not change even in the next decade. I think they will continue to be the same. So these are my opening comments. I will come back later to discuss about the impact of the pandemic, the impact of digitization on business schools, and what should business schools do in order to look at the decade ahead? Thank you for inviting me over. Over to you.
Dr. Arun, please unmute.
Arun. Thank you very much, Professor Shiva Kumar. Thank you for the initial thought. It is interesting to see your four sort of highlights, focuses on student quality, rockstar faculty, and the experience of the business school and recruiters. I hope it will continue. I mean, it's interesting that different parts of the world would see those four things differently, especially that fourth thing known as recruitment. But at this point, I would request you to continue with your thoughts on this topic so that we can discuss it later. Can you please continue, Mr. Shivakumar, please?
Me to continue. I thought Kiran was going to chip in with his opening remarks, right?
No, the idea was for you to finish and then Mr. Kiran Karnik.
Oh, I see. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's look at the pandemic and what's happened with the pandemic. Okay, if you look at the pandemic, one of the things which has happened with the pandemic is there is a greater emphasis on skills today. Even if you look at the MBA degree, the MBA degree is in its glory a 2-year course, a 1-year course, an exec education, an AMP in some cases, and specific skill-based courses. That's what it is. With the pandemic, the concept of experience, which I talked about, the student experience is dramatically different. So let me give you a simple 2x2 matrix to think about this. Imagine touch on one side, high touch, low touch, touch with the students for experience. And imagine technology on the other axis, which is high technology and low technology. Before the pandemic, all business schools were what I call high touch and low technology. That was the pre-pandemic situation in every business school. So there was a lot of touch from the teachers, there was a lot of touch from the faculty, and a lot of touch amongst the students themselves. The low touch, low tech box doesn't work. Post the pandemic, where are we? Post the pandemic, we are in a low touch, high tech situation where we are not able to touch our students, okay, face to face. We're able to do it only on the net, okay. And students have adapted to it well. And we really need to check if the faculty has adapted to it well. So we've gone from a high touch, low tech to high tech, low touch in 1 year. Now, obviously, both boxes will need to gravitate to a final concept called high touch, high tech. Okay, that is needed. And I believe some business school will pioneer this. I think a good example is think of banks who have relationship managers. Okay, now almost all of banking has gone high technology, right? But they still recognize that you need a high touch in banking. So you have relationship managers for high net worth individuals or important clients, etc. So maybe a business school will have to think about a bunch of faculty who are relationship faculty, who engage with the students differently rather than the classroom alone, and then take it forward. When we look at the pandemic, we ask ourselves, what will change? Let me go back. In 2016, the University of Illinois started an online MBA program with Coursera in 2016, 5 years ago. In the first batch, they had 114 students. Last year, they had 4,000 students. The average fees here is $22,000 against $110,000 to $120,000, which is the fee in any of the top 10 institutions. So clearly, in a matter of 5 years, the University of Illinois online MBA program has grown 35 times from 114 to 4,000. I personally believe the traditional classroom model will be replaced by the hybrid model. If you look at the pandemic alone, pre-pandemic, business course delivery was 8%. Today, it is 68%. I think in the future, concepts will be learned online, projects will be done on the ground, and classrooms will be areas for discussion and contextualization. I think the online format helps people in many ways, and I listed 4 things. The online format helps institutes get the best teachers from anywhere in the world. Absolutely no doubt about it, which is a fantastic thing. You can get the best of guest faculty. They don't need to come to your institute anymore. The online is very good because today you have better sense when students participate. In most B schools, we used to have a misnomer called class participation, where people who spoke more got more class participation marks. I think in an online world, you'll see many more people engaging with you compared to a physical world, which is also good for the students. Okay, I think most students are speaking up or commenting and involved online compared to offline. I think that's very good. I think the online is very good for teachers. I talked of rockstar faculty. I think teachers will have following now, basis their teaching. I think teachers can teach much more than just classes in an IIM. I think a challenge with online MBAs is that for the future, the digitally poor students will be challenged, because you need a laptop, you need a phone, you need a data connection, etc. So it's quite likely that some digitally poor students will be challenged. So institutes will have to think of a model by which this is part of the school fees so that you can encourage digitally poor students. Maybe you waive it off or something like that. The other thing I would definitely comment on is that research has always been a challenge for business schools. I think in 1959 or 1969, business schools were challenged that they were not doing enough research. I think the B school of the future will be challenged to do more research. I think they're already challenged. They need to do more of it. And I think faculty will have to come to the table on that. If I look at the next 10 years, the new topics which I believe business schools will grapple with will be supply chain, global supply chain or regional supply chain, number one. Digital business models. Business models alone will change. That will be a big topic of discussion. And finally, ESG. All of us have read everything to do with the Paris Accord. Today, companies are responsible to meet the Paris Accord agreement and the measures. So I think that will become an important portion of responsible MBA course. So responsible capitalism, I'll flip it back to what is a responsible MBA course? What subjects will be taught in a responsible MBA course? Because I think that is what society will want in the next few, in the next decade. I think for years, the business school has focused on the hard aspects, the numbers, the processes, the outcomes, the impact. I think with the pandemic, we have learned we need to focus on the softer aspects. The softer aspects like empathy and communication. I think communication on the web is very different from communication physically. I think the whole communication, written analysis and communication course has to be rewritten immediately for tomorrow. That's something that will happen. And finally, the employer. What does the employer want today? A company. An employer wants a finished product. Why is that so? In most companies, the management trainee scheme is shrinking in time. When I started my career, the management trainee scheme was 18 months. Today, the management trainee scheme can go from anything from 3 to 6 months. So by definition, employers are telling business schools, I want a finished product on most dimensions. So I think that is what the business school should aim to deliver in a future world. I think the structure of the business school, okay, the board of governors, the faculty, the deans, what roles will they play in a more responsible business school in the future is worth discussing by ISDSI. Okay, so those are my comments on the whole subject. Thank you very much for having me here.
Arun sir, unmute please.
Very much, Mr. Shivakumar. As a moderator, I would like to throw two questions to you so that we can have a lively discussion. The first question, it is interesting you made that 2x2 metrics, and you also said about those 4 points. I would like to connect those two. I'm interested, 2x2 metrics, basically you talked about the delivery in terms of, the touch and technology. And at the same time, in those 4 points, you also mentioned about the experience of the business school, the experience of the students. Where do you see that connection? I mean, what sort of experience in an online MBA? See, one of the criticisms about online MBA is that experience, where there is, compared to a traditional MBA. So where do you see that going? That experience versus that online?
That's a great question. Thank you, Arun, for asking that. See, experience is about face-to-face contact, what we call in an organization, the cooler room talk, the sports room talk, the ability to interact on a field, the ability to have field trips, a lot of things go into experience. The only way for an online future to buck experience is significantly up the content, significantly up the delivery and the rock starness of whoever is teaching it. In an online world, if you can get the best people to talk on the subject, that will compensate for experience. If you get average people, average professors, average guest faculty, that will not compensate for experience. So that would be my input to you. When I talked of the delivery, I talked of what Shaloni had started by saying, what should be the pedagogy of the future? I think the pedagogy of the future will be a high-tech, high-touch pedagogy. Okay, that is what people will pay for finally. Okay, the current situation of low-touch, high-tech is not sustainable.
I think that's a very, very good point. So one of the things, Mr. Shivakumar, we struggle, especially in the Australasia region, when we recruit faculty, is to get that right balance, where you have to be a rock star teacher, you also have to be a rock star researcher. Usually that doesn't go hand in hand. But good point. Just one more question before I request Mr. Kiran Karnik to come in. My second question is a very broad question. As an academic, from an industry perspective, Mr. Shivakumar, I mean, you said about 3 subjects: supply chain, digital, and ESG.
ESG.
In the curriculum, what would you like to see as an industry leader? What would you like to see? What are the 3 subjects, or from a curriculum perspective, what would you like us to teach to our business students from an industry?
Absolutely. I think great question. So let's take a very simple thing like business models. Okay, how is value created? How does the journey of a product or a service start from creation to into the hands of the consumer? One of the things we've learned in the last 1 year, the whole business delivery and where value is captured in the value chain has changed significantly. And hence it has led to a lot of startups who are challenging traditional companies. And traditional companies are at a loss because they're organized in the old, fossil way. So I think, what are new trends in the way consumers are adopting to digital, in the way they are seeking value? I think that would be important. If you look at supply chain, I think we've simplified supply chain either into a global supply chain or a local supply chain. I believe both are wrong. If you actually look at the data, there are 3 strong regional hubs in the world, in world trade. One is the China hub, one is the America hub, and one is the Germany hub. And the 3 are interrelated. I think the concept of what is a regional supply chain, what is a local supply chain, what is a global supply chain? Because no country has everything to do in every category. They might have for one category. So countries are interdependent. What is the flow of the goods of raw material? Okay, where does value get created and why does value get created in a global supply chain? Because one of the things we notice here, look at all the trading companies. Thanks to information freely available on the net today, there is no value in information arbitrage. So the value is now in time value. So a supply chain is valued much more on time, whether it's a consumer or a large corporation. Today, you look at anybody who orders, they want it within 24 hours, they want it within 4 hours. Time has become a very big element of supply chains and marketing. And I think most schools tend to overlook that. And the final comment I would have is, if you seriously step back and ask yourself, when was the last big concept generated by an academy? It must be 2003, bottom of the pyramid by C.K. Prahalad. Before that, it must have been Peter Drucker, KRAs as well as span of control, etc. So one of the questions I think the faculty of business schools needs to sit back and ask, and that's why I raised the point of research, what new concepts are we bringing to business? Otherwise, it's business doing concepts for themselves, which is not good for a business school. If you are the thinkers, you are the people who are going to lead businesses by the nose in terms of academic brilliance, then you should be doing more fundamental research and asking yourself those questions. Because all the answers over the last 40 years, from Jack Welch's time to now, most of them have come from business leaders and not from academics. If you went back before 70, most of the thinking came from academics. All of strategy thinking came from academics, nobody else. It didn't come from business. So that's the thing I would say that business schools need to change.
Fantastic, challenging. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Thank you very much for your fantastic thought. Thank you for your time. It was really fantastic. Now, our second speaker, everybody knows, is a very eminent speaker. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Kiran Karnik to talk to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First, let me say a very big thank you to ISDSI and to Professor Metri and IIM Nagpur for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be here amongst all of you and to listen to such interesting talks and speakers. Looking forward to more discussion as we go ahead. Thank you very much, Dr. Arun Elias. I think it's good that you could join us at an odd time of the day. I assume you're yet in Wellington, a very safe place to be in. Many of us envy you. I was joking the other day, I wish we could borrow your Prime Minister, but that's a different aspect. I hope you're doing well and safe there. This indeed taking off from where Shiv left off. And let me say straight away that not only because Shiv, or not because Shiv is a dear friend, but the things he said, I couldn't agree with more. So I just say ditto to almost everything he said, with some additions, which I will make in a few moments. But I don't want to cover what he has done so exceedingly well. And as usual, with sharp, pointed, focused points. I may ramble a bit. So let me start with my thoughts and proceed from where I was. I want to start with a slightly different perspective. And I must say that in part, more than in part, I spent a lot of the last year and a half in putting together my book. And so I'm yet looking at the future and looking at India 2030. And therefore, quite naturally, I want to use that perspective to look from there and then maybe step back and say, therefore, what should management education do? So if I look at the world in 2030, and let me start with just a few broad comments on what I see. First, the world, but in a general way, but more specifically on India. I see 3 or 4 things. Some are very obvious, and Shiv touched on one of them, the supply chains, global, as you rightly said, regional, and then local. The global one was disrupted in the pandemic, but I don't doubt that, as we're already seeing, it will be back again very soon. And we will find ways to overcome it. Yes, a lot of people have taken preemptive steps to say that, look, after such a bad experience, we either need more local supply chains or more controllable or more alternatives to the single sources that we had. But I don't doubt that whichever way it moves, we will not get away from global supply chains for the simple reason that there are, as Economics 101, which I learned long ago, told me, and I don't think that has changed, that there is special value or factor advantage in each location, each place, maybe each set of people. And that's not going to go away very soon. We will not have, even in a so-called flat world, a complete equalization of all aspects. And therefore, there will be always some value to be had from getting a supply from somewhere else for some piece, part, assembly, whatever. So I see that continuing, and therefore globalization, though many people feel that globalization is ending, just as Shiv rightly said, capitalism in the traditional form seems to be in its death throes. It will be reinvented, it is being reinvented, and is yet called, as he said, soft capitalism, equitable capitalism, compassionate capitalism. The word capitalism is yet used, but I think it's just a curtsy to capitalism, because what is emerging is, yes, many aspects of it, but drastically changed. And in the same way, many people expect that globalization is also going to die out and maybe be something very different. That's not my perspective. I think at least looking to 2030, I do think that globalization, in terms of what concerns us as managers, will continue. Not just supply chains, which we talk about basically meaning goods, but obviously also services. And as part of services, global supply chains for human resources. And my hope and expectation is that there you will see trade barriers easing, not going away. There are yet going to be continuing, barriers to free movement of people, unlike, say, the free movement of goods or the free movement of data. But they will considerably reduce, because as countries face problems of aging, of shortage of particular kinds of talent, of the need to bring in certain kinds of expertise, you're going to see a more open flow than we have seen in the past. And therefore, an important aspect is going to be the global supply chain, if you like to call it that, in human resources. I had a few other broader points on where we might be, but let me take off from that point and then step back into where we are and say, look, if this is going to be a major thing, and as we know that despite automation, which I'll come to in a moment, there is going to be need for human resources of all kinds of levels and categories in countries that are short of human resource in the working age group, which is practically all of Europe, China, and considerable parts of certainly some parts of the US and certainly in Japan, and maybe in a few other countries. The only places where you'll have a very large working age population, in fact, the biggest in the world, will be India and a few countries in Africa. And here, given the level of education, skill, and talent we have a special ability. And therefore, I see a huge possibility for India becoming a far bigger base, a focal point for human resources. So far, it has been looked at as a great place to get tech expertise. And the IT industry has capitalized on that in more ways than one. I don't have to dwell on that. But I begin to see that this is going to broaden to a lot of other areas. And certainly one very big area is going to be in the area of management talent. Already, it's not something new because many companies have done it for years, I would say for decades, but in very small ways and small numbers. No wonder there are so many top CEOs in very big companies who are of Indian origin, sometimes who have studied in India, sometimes just of Indian origin, and we like to claim them as our own. But increasing numbers are those who have studied here and then gone there and taken a job and made their way up. And you're slowly beginning to see that people are not just going there and making their way up, but are moving in lateral, or I would say diagonal steps from serious roles and senior roles in India to equally senior or higher roles outside the country. That's going to increase, and the demand for high-level managerial talent is going to be huge. India brings something special here, and I think it's partly the fact that the talent which we have nursed here and the experiences they go through, which are very, very challenging given our context, give them a special edge in many, many cases. But let me quickly move to therefore what it might mean in 3 or 4 areas of specifically management education. And I will not elaborate on each of them or explain them. Some of them may be obvious, but I want to say there was a question which I think, Dr. Elias, you hinted at, saying what are the new things in the curriculum? And Shiv talked about a little bit about it, and he certainly talked of the challenge of high touch, high tech, the combination which is the best of the 4 quadrants. But I think that we might want to look at some new themes, if you don't call them subjects. One is something which you might seem is very futuristic, but it's here already, and that is how to manage human-machine interaction. In my day, we studied organizational behavior and talked about how to manage relationships between human beings, and we talked of team building, and we talked of the necessities of looking at a workforce which is maybe a little bit diverse and what you need to do. So I think you're going to have a new dimension altogether, not only global diversity, national diversity, ethnic and gender diversity, you're also going to have to deal with diversity of humans and non-humans. And this is a new and emerging challenge, saying, how do you combine the two? Automation, as we're beginning to see already, and there's some good research on this, is not going to mean a complete replacement of humans in certain jobs. It's going to mean a combination of human skills with machine skills. And how does a manager look at this and bring about this integration to optimize it in a way he'd have done in the past? Now, of course, one way of looking at it is that this is not terribly new. I mean, every factory has machines and they have people and they work together. But I think we are moving to a completely new dimension where it's not the physical aspect of what a machine does. It is equally the almost cognitive aspects of what a machine does through, for example, artificial intelligence, and combining that with human intelligence. And this is going to be a new challenge, which somehow has to be imbibed by managers because they are going to have to manage it. The technologists will manage the technology, but managers are going to have to manage this overall thing and see where it goes. The second one, and this is fairly obvious, coming mainly from the pandemic, but there have been many cases before that, is more content, maybe even a separate course on crisis management. This is something managers have to learn to handle. What to do when a completely unexpected crisis hits you. Not something which you can look at, plan for, even anticipate, but something completely unanticipated. So you might say the unknown unknown. If that hits you, how do you react? And I think this is going to be increasingly important. We always talk of a possible new virus, but who knows what else might hit us? I mean, viruses were known, but we didn't plan for it. There may be something else which is known, but which haven't thought of. But there may well be something completely unknown to us which happens. And how does the manager, the company, the organization deal with this in all its aspects, in terms of the business, people, customers, supply chain, all of it? The third aspect really is to do with, partly related to this, the need for agility. It's related but different because one of the things that we need much more about is quickly changing. So far, we attribute agility to startups, where they pivot quickly, they find something doesn't work, they move quickly. And that's supposed to be a big strength of smaller, younger startups as compared to a large company. It's like steering a large ship versus a speedboat, which you can turn around quickly. And the large ship is going to take a long time. And the startup is supposed to be very agile. How do we build that kind of agility into larger organizations so that they can move quickly when faced with anything from a crisis to an opportunity? Part of that agility, and a different aspect of it, a different nuance of it, you might say, is the ability to work with, maybe even integrate startups. This is a growing challenge because many companies are recognizing that excellent work, exceptional work, disruptive work, both in terms of technology and business models, is coming from the newer startups. And so you want to either work with them or maybe even take them over. But how do you make sure that when you integrate them, you don't lose the positives of what a startup with its dynamism, its willingness to take risks, its small team, its non-bureaucratic functioning, all those aspects which don't normally gel into a big organization? How do you retain those and yet bring it into your fold? I've found that while this may seem a very defined problem, the ability of existing managers to do this is extremely limited. They've not gone through this. They don't quite understand it. They've not had either enough experience, which is of course difficult to come by, but enough discussion or even theoretical knowledge of saying, how do I deal with this kind of issue? It's a people issue. It's sometimes a technology issue. It's an organization systems issue. So there are multiple dimensions to it. And how do you make sure that you're able to do that as you move forward? Completely different aspect, and let me move to that quickly. I just talked of technology, and Shiv mentioned how technology will be part of the learning process in many ways and what role it will play. But I want to talk of technology in a different way in terms of delivery. He gave the example of the University of Illinois and the huge increase in online courses. Now, one of the things these online courses are doing is a step ahead of what technology did earlier. The early parts of use of technology were what we call disintermediation. You reach the consumer customer directly, you take up a lot of steps in between, and that's good. You capture value either at the delivery end or at the consumer end, maybe both ends and both gain, and you've taken out the intermediaries who are not necessary. So disintermediation was the first step in many ways. The second has been dematerialization, the second D, you might say, and that comes in the obvious forms. And the most simplistic and simple form to understand is a book that's transformed into something on your Kindle. So from a physical book, you're there, or music that goes from old days of a long flowing record or the new days of a solid state drive to just streaming. Those are two stages that are recognized here already here. The third stage, which is actually upon us and we don't quite recognize it, is, for lack of a better word, and I know it's not the right one to use, is the third D, demonetization. That more and more services are being delivered without monetary compensation. And the best example from our area, which we discussed, is online courses. Today, Shiv mentioned University of Illinois, and they charge you $22,000, not just for the course, it's mainly, frankly, for the degree you get. You can probably do a course that's 80-90% as good for free on one of the many online sites that are there. May not be quite the same, but almost there, and you zero cost. So, you're beginning to see a lot of things, and I'm speaking of education, but very clearly you can see many, many other examples of services that are delivered without charging you. They're delivered free. And of course, they derive the value from elsewhere, which we can take separately. It's a different kind of business model. But you as a consumer don't pay anything. And the person who delivers it may, be in competition with somebody who's charging. So what are traditional universities used to brick and mortar going to do if there's new competition from people who are delivering courses online in the extreme form free? But if not free, again, same example, for $22,000 instead of $110,000 or whatever, at 1/4, 1/5 the cost. How are traditional universities going to cope with this? Are they going to adopt this method, which is one possibility, in which case they have to have very, very large student bodies in order to make sure that the rock star professors whom Shiv mentioned are people they can retain, keep, and nurture? Or they have to look at where else does the model work, where does the value come from? And I think this is a challenge, not just to management institutions, but indeed to all of education, but particularly for management institutions, because already a lot of people are used to executive education programs, in-service programs, learn while you work. And this is in some ways a step forward. And if you can get it for a low cost or no cost, then the temptation to avoid going to a executive development program in one of the institutions may be great. And this is going to be an increasing challenge in terms of managing these institutions and what they do and how they deliver. A couple of other points we're going to see, and now I speak of India, we're going to see inevitably, though it's taken a long time, people have gone back and forth on whether they will be allowed or no, but you're going to see a lot of competition inevitably from foreign universities. At some point of time in the future, and certainly as I see by 2030, if not much earlier, 2035 very definitely, you're going to see a lot of very well-known, highly reputed foreign institutions setting up base in India. Now, what does this mean for the student? It means wide choice. It's very good. What does it mean for our existing institutions? How are they going to cope? How are they going to take on this challenge? What do they need to do? And of course, at a much broader level, which I will not dwell on here, what does it mean for regulation or deregulation and autonomy for these institutions so that they are free to, get better people, charge higher fees, pay more salaries, whatever they want? What kind of flexibility and freedom will they have in all the dimensions, many of which are hugely constrained today, not just in the government-funded institutions, but by other regulations of AICTE or UGC and others, which constrain them a great deal today. So what is it going to mean? How is this going to play out? I think this is another dimension of management education, not of the students necessarily, but of management education for institutions. That's going to be a growing challenge as we move forward. Just a couple of other points before I end. I mentioned artificial intelligence earlier, and to me, this is one area in which most management schools that I've seen have fallen behind. This is a huge area which has to be tapped by management and managers in order to aid decision making, in order to aid what they do, in order to model and make projections, in order to do predictive problem solving. And so far, both the understanding and the use of data sciences or artificial intelligence has been very, very limited. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but it's very limited. Companies are way ahead, and I think the educational institutions are behind on this. One result of this, which doesn't quite work out, is that many companies tend to use technologists. And I don't think that's ideal because they don't understand business. They're good at the technology, they can tell you about artificial intelligence or data science, they can provide you, great models to do what you want to do, but because they don't understand the business and are not able to define the business problem, they're unable to leverage these to the extent that might be possible if they didn't have to go through this aspect of, not understanding. And therefore, the business graduate of today actually, but certainly of tomorrow, must have a very strong understanding of these aspects. Having said that, let me end on a note which is slightly different. And to me, this is a challenge because this is sort of two contradictory forces at work and pulling in different ways. One is increasing specialization. And we see this most visibly in what you might call the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, where there is necessity to go deeper and deeper, get more research done, get more researchers. PhDs are important. And you see that even in the industrial world, where the level of people being employed to carry out many functions related to, let's say, technology is increasing. I know companies from my early days in looking at the IT industry, I had great difficulty persuading even very big companies that they would better off with an MTech or a PhD rather than a BTech, because they would bring more value. But they didn't feel so. They felt a BTech is good enough, and every year spent after that is a year wasted. I think that perspective has changed, and there is recognition of the deeper learning that comes there. Now, the same holds true in understanding of these subjects for a manager. A deeper understanding of technology, not being an expert, but understanding is important. And to that extent, one might say that the model which many of the well-known institutions in India followed of ending up with a very high percentage of engineers is not so bad, because they have a grounding, they have an understanding, and on top of that, they build business capabilities, a managerial understanding, and they may not delve too much into their base of engineering, but the basic fact that they've gone through that is very helpful. So this is one part which might seem to be continuingly useful. But I see a completely new trend, and I see that increasing in the years to come, and that is that you're going to get more and more people required who have an understanding of the humanities and the arts. First, there's going to be a big market for these areas, because as countries get more prosperous, certainly I hope India, but not necessarily if you look at other countries, the demand for experiences is going to be bigger than that for goods. You already see that in terms of entertainment and content of all kinds. And as prosperity increases, leisure time increases, everything from, restaurants, foods, movies, games is going to increase. And therefore, there is going to be a demand for people who can, run, operate, manage, create these businesses, which will be basically derived from an understanding of what you might broadly call the humanities and arts. The second is an understanding that as we tend to automate more, there is going to be a pushback or a reaction where more people want human interaction. And we see that already in some ways. We know the advantages of online learning, but at the same time, people are missing out on that human interaction. And many people feel that they're missing out something, being on campus, talking with fellow students, talking to a professor, and they feel that the experience is not quite the same. That kind of requirement is going to increase. And that understanding of that would require people who understand psychology, sociology as much or more than they understand technology. So the manager of the future, having a background in technology will be useful, but I see the demand increasing, in fact, for those who have a better understanding of some of the social sciences and the humanities. And that's going to be a dimension which we need to take into account as we look at the incoming students and what kind of incoming filters we are using. Clearly, our present filters tend to filter these people out. They tend to favor the engineer. They tend to favor maybe the science student, and they don't favor the arts humanities kind of person. We see that just from admission figures. So some change in that as we move forward will be almost inevitable. And therefore, the last sub point on this, and I close with this, is managers who can play a much bigger role in what you might call, to use a cliche, connecting the dots. Those who don't know the detail of technology, or who are not psychologists or sociologists, who are not necessarily researchers in a particular aspect of artificial intelligence, but understand something about the subject or can speak that language so that they can link something between artificial intelligence, data science, and something to do with sociology, something to do with crowds, something to do with people. So you are going to need managers who are able to have a broader spectrum and be able to connect things so as to be able to derive whatever business lessons and benefits there are from this. I had a few more points, but let me end there. I've taken a little more time than I should. So thank you very much, and back to you, Dr. Elias.
Thank you very much. It was fantastic. Thank you very much for your wisdom. Thank you for sharing it. Just to continue with the discussion, let me put two questions to you. My first question is about the point you said about aging. Aging, I totally agree with you. It is one of the world's biggest problems. I mean, think about a country like New Zealand. There is only 5 million people, less than 5 million people, and aging is a real issue here. Less number of younger people, big middle age, but hugely aged. I want to bring in the business school into this concept, into this issue of aging. So I want to think about our normal MBA in India, where MBA focuses on the 22-year-old who passes out of an undergraduate, undergraduate school and goes to an MBA program. There is another thinking, especially in other parts of the world, not in the US, but in other parts of the world, where MBA is not for 22-year-old. It is for that mature, the grooming manager who is in his or in her 30s or 40s. So I just want to understand your thought on this. What is an MBA? I mean, is it for the young, 22-year-old, or is it for the more mature person? Your thoughts, it would be great to hear from you.
Dr. Elias, I should tell you that when I entered IIM at Ahmedabad, I was all of 19 years old. And, most of my classmates were a little older than me, but just a little bit. And I missed greatly, I can tell you in retrospect, the fact that we didn't have, while we had very little diversity in terms of gender, though we had other diversities, we had no diversity in age. And I think people forget that. I think the learning that comes from peer interaction of having people with experience is tremendous. But to a more broad question that should we look at this kind of thing, I completely agree with you. Two reasons. One is, of course, the fact of experience and how you can use that to enhance your learning when you're going through a course, especially a course like in management. The second is something else. A lot of people today anticipate, expect, and it's very true today, that much of their clientele whom they're getting to is young people. And so you see company after company wanting to get to the young and saying, we must use social media, we must use things that the young are in, forget the traditional advertising, forget print and so on. And I understand that it makes sense. But if you look ahead 10 years, even in India, leave alone, as you rightly said, countries in New Zealand, or as I mentioned, Europe or Japan or China, and I keep emphasizing China because people think it's a large population, it's a rapidly aging population, very rapidly. The market is going to be for older people because there are, number one, more older people. Second, they live longer. So, and many of them in a country like India, obviously a minuscule percentage, but even in India, a substantial absolute number are reasonably well off. They've retired, they have nothing to do, they have money, and they are a big market. So just as we begin to see on a completely different dimension, already even in India, and I keep emphasizing that India, schools beginning to close in Kerala because there are not enough students. As you know, they had a very good, because of literacy and good healthcare, their population growth came down very rapidly, but schools are closing. And I must tell you, the subtitle of my chapter on health in my book on India 2030 is called More Anganwadis and Less Schools. Sorry, more old age homes and less Anganwadis. Anganwadis are where the young go because we're going to have that problem. And around the world, it's true. So the fact that you need managers to maybe understand a little bit more, empathize with older people, but also to your question, yes, the experience that comes from having worked for at least 5-6 years, if not 10 years, I think it greatly enriches an MBA course. Now, maybe you can have some managers who are very young, but I would favor not one extreme or the other. I would favor a diversity, which is also an age diversity, which may be a skew or a bias towards a slightly older 20, 30 plus maybe people.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you. So my first question was about students. You answered it so well. It was so insightful. My second question is about teacher, the management teacher, the teacher in management education. You brought in artificial intelligence. I totally agree. Artificial intelligence is going to have a big impact on business schools. One subject, one particular subject, which I think will be really impacted will be accounting. So when you take structured decision, when the decision making is very structured, very, very clear, do you need a teacher? Or will artificial intelligence completely replace it? These are questions I'm sure accounting bodies are now we recently had an accreditation visit. This particular question was asked to us. I just want to think, you mentioned about human-machine interaction, the courses on human interaction, machine interaction, so meaningful. My question, sir, to you is that if this artificial intelligence come in, what is the role of a teacher? Who is a teacher? Who is a teacher in management education? What is your vision there?
I think you asked a very interesting question, Dr. Elias. And, let me essay an answer, though I have no quick or easy answer. I think, as we see already, that things that are very clearly rule-based will move to a machine very quickly. Many of them already have, and there's no question that the machine will do it superior with fewer errors, much faster, much better, 24/7, which humans won't do, as long as it's a rule-based, clearly defined item. But as long as you have uncertainties that come from things that come from the human mind, which is not predictable, and despite all attempts at modeling doesn't quite work, you're going to have to need some human element there that comes in. So I see that as being what I call a combination of the two. Now, in something like accounting and the role of the teacher, as you said, I do see not only in that, but in many, many other subjects, and I think Shiv mentioned this, that you get a lot of things which are purely online, something that the student can do at their convenience, at their time, at their pace. And the role of the teacher is going to be much more in terms of having a discussion, clearing up issues, bringing in experience, bringing in altogether different kinds of perspectives on the problem. To me, I want to just add also that a lot of learning comes from peer interaction. I mentioned earlier about the age diversity, but I think that's one thing that technology misses out, because and Shiv answered this in part. I want to add a little bit to that. He did mention water coolers, and something I'd done on innovation indicates to me that a lot of the innovation and new ideas come from exactly that, the water cooler moment, when you're chatting with a colleague with no agenda, you're not discussing work, it's a casual meeting, you discuss a movie or yesterday's cricket match or whatever, and then suddenly something comes up on work and you mention that. And the very same with students. And today, in a purely tech mode, you miss that non-agenda, non-defined, non-structured space where free interaction can take place in a cafe, on a step outside, just walking somewhere after class, and that's going to be missing out. And that's something I don't know what role the teacher can play, but some facilitation of that kind of role, both with regard to the teacher-student relationship and the student-student relationship. No easy answers on how to bring it about if you're purely online, but it's something we need to think about and see, can you simulate it to the extent possible till such time as we can get back to truly blended learning, where it's a mix of being physically present and online. But to your question again, I want to come back and just say that, in future, I see a lot of the standard stuff moving completely to online, because some of it will be automated. You won't even need the student to learn it. The rest of it, they can absorb when they want to, and you don't need a teacher for that.
Thank you very much, sir. Very insightful. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience learned a lot too. Thank you very much for your interaction with us. It is my pleasure now to invite the third speaker, the visionary of ISDSI Professor Metri, please.
Very good evening. Thank you very much, Professor Arun. And I'm very happy to say all the distinguished participants that the two great insights from two great innovators. I must say, Kiran Karnik ji, if you look at after Ahmedabad sir has not told about his journey, he himself is a women library. Right from ISRO 20 years, if you look at the Discovery Channel, if you look at the UGC Global Connect, and if you look at the NASSCOM as a president, 8-year golden years for the country, and again his contribution as an advisor to the Prime Minister and also RBI, and I think the list goes big. Such a great innovator in all the area. I think his insights, I am sure everybody might be enjoying, and it is basically now we have to think of, what what Karnik ji said. I think I always it comes to my mind a professor, because he's even though I think he is actually may not be having the title, but he is much more than professor. I must say he is the guru of innovation, Karnik Saab. And also I must say that Shiva Kumar ji is my good friend, and since my MDI days we know each other. And if you look at his time at Nokia, he was heading India and even Southeast Dubai and all, and also PepsiCo, and currently Aditya Birla Group. And his book, Right Choices, that Professor Saloni rightly said, I think all those insights, if you see that we have two great innovators, and I think these great innovators and those insights, both school of thought, I'm sure our title, Management Education 21 to 2035, keeping new education policy 2020 in mind, I think we have received a lot of insights. Probably a number of roundtables and workshops are not good enough to think on it and come out, and probably they are going to be very, very useful in coming years, how to shape up the management education in the country. So thank you, Karnik Saab, sir. Thank you very much. Your insights always, as always, I always listen your videos, and your books are fantastic. And I must say that every participants here, I think interesting book, and one chapter on education, a future of management education. Karnik Saab's book is there. Everybody should, I think, go through it, and lot of insights and he has given, and some of them he has touched upon. Now let me talk about the topic. My great friend Arun ji is here, and Professor Kedkar, Professor Ravi Kumar, and all. Rahul is a a great friend from media side, and Professor Saloni is great communicator in the country. I must say that communication professor, you find very few like her stature. So all these great insights and all the participants. So I would like to talk about few points. Probably as Karnik Saab rightly said, I think what Shiv Kumarji and Karnik Saab said, I will not repeat. I will some other points I'll bring which are connected to that, as Karnik Saab rightly ended with connecting the dots. So I'll come to those points, and first of all, to begin with, we are already passed from industrial era and we are already moved to the intelligence era. We are in the intelligence era. In intelligence era, everything is intangible. Nothing is visible. If you go to the industry, the people are working, assembly line, all those things you can see. But in intelligence era, everything is invisible. But best of the best result you can see. Faster, cheaper, and better you can find in the intelligence era. And best example is DBS Bank of Singapore. So best services to everybody, and bank is not visible. Nobody knows where bank is there. So that is a kind of fluid world we are. So as Professor Ravi Kumar and Arun ji rightly say, leading business in a fluid world, that is what the conference is going to be there in December. So instead of using American and European, so why can't we create our own terminology and words? So that is why we are talking about fluid world, because from stable to unstable, uncertain kind of environment, as all of you know that the future is fluid, leadership is fluid, because context is also fluid, it is changing because of disruptions, and workforce is a liquid which Accenture coined in 2016, and it is a skills are reskilling, reskilling, and lifelong learning has become a norm. And as you know that the strategy is also emergent strategy, planned strategy is not going to work out, so that is why it is a fluid. And that is why the fluid world has come, and probably as Shiv Kumarji rightly said, this fluid world has brought many important good things, that is high tech and high touch, what Shiv Kumarji rightly said. And speed has taken over the size of the company in this fluid world. Apart from that, as all of you know that NEP 2020, right time it has come when the world is disrupting every sector, including education sector. So the change has to take place, and resistance to change is going already, that has been that chapter. The I can say the rehearsal has happened in this COVID era. Probably NEP is going to go in full swing within no time. It is going to start. So that is why in this fluid world, the important things, as Professor Saloni rightly said, that unknown roles are going to come after the graduation. keeping Maruti, Bharat Electronics, ONGC in mind, I cannot go to the education because something else will come and probably those jobs are taken by the robots. Apart from unknown roles, we also, management institution also have to prepare the students. Apart from handling the unknown roles, they should also prepare the students that they should be able to lead the unborn companies after their graduation. Probably when they join the graduation and when they complete the graduation, in between the companies may born and they should able to handle, they should able to lead those companies. So that is the kind of students, leaders, the management education has to prepare in this disruptive world. So that is where what worked 5 year, 10 year, 20 year back, that's not going to work out in 2025, 2030 and 35. If you look at the World Economic Forum, top 10 skills, and all those skills, if you want to summarize in one way, active learning is the one of the important skill they talked about, and which is very close to the heart of management education. So how to bring the active learning in the form of pedagogy, in the form of curriculum, in the form of examination, evaluation, assessment, because still we are using the Stone Age assessment, that is a scoring system, which doesn't capture the tenacity, which doesn't capture the curiosity, which doesn't capture the, but maybe the meeting. So we have to revisit in the upcoming year, because future world is not going to hire the students based on the knowledge, not only skill alone, not only attitude alone, but they are going to hire them based on the growth mindset. Fixed mindset, there is no space in the intelligence era. You have to be a growth mindset. So that is why 4 dimensions for management education: knowledge, which Google gives in good amount, and of course you learn in education also in management education. But apart from that, the changing skills, that is a competency part, the attitude, which are already input come from the childhood till now, but also we have to add certain component, how one has to be a responsible citizen. Then apart from attitude, the most important, the 4th dimension is, that is a capability building, growth mindset. So that is the 4th component, how to build in the business school. Those who have growth mindset, those who are the perpetual learner, those who are the readers, they are going to take up the unborn roles, and in unborn companies to lead, they are going to be ready. So that is why it is important to reinvent the future of management education with radical flexibility. Rigidity, stupidity, and one has to get into a flexibility. And flexibility talks about, the moment we talk about flexibility, there has to be rethinking, redesign, and rebuilding of management education has to happen in coming year, I can say, because change is happening so fast. So it is not in decades, but it has to start, and the changes should continuously happen. And NEP also, we have to incorporate very gold standard, it has come. So that is why I can find out some 5 kind of important things one is to keep in mind while rethinking, while looking at the future of management education. Of 25 or 30, I will not say 35 is far long, I think all of you agree, maybe 25. So for that, active learning, how to introduce, for that purpose, what they should learn in active learning. So that is where one important component is, that is a fearless leadership. We learned all kinds of leadership, but fearless leadership is because a disruption is happening very often, like a tsunami, like a COVID. So fearless leadership, what I mean fearless leadership is, one has to be a courageous, and apart from courageous, compassionate, and apart from that, curiosity. These 3 things are 3 C's are important to be a fearless leadership. And how to introduce that component in the management education, that is important to take up the totally new kind of roles and jobs and skilling, unskilling, reskilling, and continuous basis as a lifelong learner. This fearless leadership is one important component. Second one is learning to learn. So it is not what teachers say and I learn, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous. But apart from that, when you learn, at the same time you have to learn. Learning to learn means, suppose it is basically when you are playing a game, maybe in the first round you may lose, second round you may win. Third round, you may learn. So you can sharpen your decision-making skill by doing mistake and by learning from mistake, and you sharpen it. So this is how, if you get into that kind of pedagogy, learning to learn happens. And that is most important apart from what teachers teach. And that is where I think Professor Arun asked the question, I think very interesting question, what is the role of teachers? And I must say, I think Sir has, Karnik Sir has very rightly said, I think I must say that in another word, I can say, teacher role is an advisor, teacher role is a guru. They have to only give the tips and advice, and students have to experience the phenomena, learning to learn should happen, and they should come out innovative problems. Their role, instead of teacher, they have to get into higher level as an advisor, as a mentor, as a guru. They have to play the role instead of just teachers in coming years. Apart from that, one more important thing for the management students in future, thinking about thinking. That part has to be a part of management education. Thinking of thinking, or thinking about thinking. It is only, just once point is given, you are thinking on that. That is not required. That point itself is right or wrong. So thinking of thinking or thinking about thinking is extremely important. One is to look into that. And apart from that, learning from failures. Learning to fail and failing to learn. This is going to be the important phenomenon in management education. We have treated till now failure as a bad word. But today, the way disruption we have adopted as a good word. Same way, failure is a heart of the success for any individual or any organization. So we should fail early, and we should again succeed early. And that is why learning to fail and failing to learn, these concepts you have to introduce, you have to appreciate, we have to reward the best failures, but it shouldn't be the first time failure. Those kind of things we should incorporate in management education. And apart from that, as I told you, active learning, which is mentioned in the World Economic Forum. So in the form of active learning, all these things, whatever I talked about, fearless leadership, learning to learn, thinking about thinking, learning for failure, all these things can be taught to the student adopting the new method or new pedagogy. Because learning goal has changed from knowledge, skill and attitude, the one more component, that is the capability or growth mindset. So that learning goal has now extended, and to achieve all the four at the same time, the active learning, as per the World Economic Forum, we have to get into new pedagogy. That pedagogy, I must say, it is a phenomena-based learning. It is a project-based learning. So when the phenomena-based learning means, basically you have to get into gamification. You put the group of students, you give them a game of mergers and acquisition. Then there the professor will not teach, but professor will act as an advisor or consultant, or great gurus. They give the tips, law professor who teaches the, business law, he will advise about the legal aspect of merger and acquisition. HR people, two culture, how to merge. IT persons, information system professor, one is ERP, one company is Oracle, how to combine, how to integrate, they will talk about. Finance people, how to manage both the PLF, both the parts. So every area, strategy people, how to execute the strategy, two different strategies working, two companies. So every area of management, all the professor in a group together, they will advise the group of students, and students will experience as a phenomena, and PBL or Finobel, in Finland it is called as a Finobel. So Finobel pedagogy one should adopt, phenomena-based learning, and it can also be a project-based learning. It is also called again PBL. So this kind of pedagogy, group of teachers advising and group of students doing project, that experience-based learning is going to work out, and such students automatically growth mindset will come into picture. Automatically learning to learn, learning from failure and failing to learn, and fearless leadership, and the building the confidence and courage, all those things will come into picture, and you need not to conduct a separate assessment or examination. Already that game, 10 rounds of game, if they do out of 10, 8 rounds they will, a group will win, and 2 rounds they fail. So it is as good as examination is over, and the group of students have been declared as a excellent. So you need not to conduct a separate examination, a group of teachers, all the functional areas they are observing how students are doing. So that is why there is no separate examination. Learning and examination all happens together. You will find out who is a courageous, who is a tenacity, thinking many things at a time. All those things can be observed. So those kind of teaching, because disruption is happening very often and context is changing. So context is changing like a flowing water in a river. So same water you can't touch once again, second time. So in such circumstances, I think this kind of management pedagogy we must use, and the gamification, as I told you, online games are there, simulation games are there, even physical games, those kind of things probably we need to promote. And apart from that, I should say some of the things I think Karnik Saab very nicely said. What kind of mindset, we talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, our institutions social responsibility. Now the NEP talking about global social responsibility. We should broaden our horizon from institute to corporate to global social responsibility. So Shivakumar ji talked about, the corporate needs a corporate ready product. Now, corporate ready product word is going to replace a future ready product, because corporate today what it needs, tomorrow it is different. And day after tomorrow it is different because the technology has changed, disruption has happened. So how to prepare a future ready product? FRP instead of CRP, that is need of an hour. So to get into all kinds of things, so global business responsibility and future ready product. So that is what has to be the focus, the end goal of the business school, to prepare such kind of product so that industry can be in huge demand. And to do that, we have to put the great industry leaders into the schools, and they will help to produce the leaders who can take up the any kind of roles, any kind of uncertainty, fearless leadership they can adopt, and they can get into a best result. And that is where I think I was just reading how many Indian leaders are leading the top companies in the world. So they are given 60 odd billion. I think I was just going through a large number of people, 20 and odd people from India, top-notch global companies, because they are the great sense makers. We have to prepare the sense maker 3 years down the line, what things are going to disappear, what new things are coming, how many jobs are going to disappear, how many new jobs are going to come. I think Karnik Saab, NASSCOM, when IT and businesses were growing at that time, I think he did a great job, even Discovery Channel. So that kind of innovation, that kind of mindset, growth mindset, and thinking about the future, thinking. So those things are required, and that kind of business school, I'm thinking we should be preparing students and product of business schools, that kind of thing. So with this, I'll stop over here, and if any questions, I'll take up. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor Metri, for sharing your thoughts. I just want to ask one question as a moderator, then we can move. Your point about rigidity versus flexibility is so true. I completely agree with you. Traditionally we used to be rigid in this is management education, but we really need to be flexible because times are changing, the environment is changing. So I completely agree with you. But I think this is a question we have discussed before in your time in MDI. My question is about IIMs or Indian business schools in general, where the question I'm asking is quantity versus quality. Quantity versus quality. I mean, we tend to have 2-year full-time, programs where it is quite long, and many business schools around the world has made it into 1 year, and some of the Indian business schools themselves are going. So, what is your vision, sir? What is your vision in terms of how much is required? Are we doing too much?
I think, Arunji, partially agree. We are teaching too many courses comparing to schools in Europe, America, even Australia and New Zealand. Number of courses, what we are teaching, number of hours, what we are teaching. And that is how I think what I say, we have created a great followers and not great innovators and great leaders, because we teach so much, they don't get a time to think. Thinking about thinking doesn't happen there. learning to learn doesn't happen because there is no time available, because they have to do lot many things. So that is where I fully agree. But in new education policy, NEP 2020, there is a multiple entry, multiple exit. One can go back and come back and go, and they can get the certificate or diploma or degree, that is also there. But apart from that, what we are thinking, the kind of model in NEP, in maybe some of my colleagues and friends in directors of IIM, we are thinking probably Singapore Management University model. Every department will become a school of social science, school of decision science, school of economics, school of marketing, school of HRM. So all those schools will come 1 year degree program. We can call MSc in leadership, MSc in economics, MSc in social science. Each department will give a degree of 1 year in a very, very specialized area. And those schools will be giving input to MBA of the school, which is MBA is already interdisciplinary. What NEP talking about interdisciplinary? It is already there in management education. It is totally interdisciplinary, all areas drawing a resource from different specialization. So we are thinking that kind of model, and probably experienced people and future, as I think both our great speaker talked about, it is going to be hybrid. And probably these courses already we are, I think since I am the All India Board of Management Studies, I am the chairman. So earlier we used to 350 contact hours, we are reduced to 960. We have already done that one, we have reduced, but further reduction is required, and we are going to do it. And in subsequently, probably we come with the global standard, reducing the number of courses, giving more time for thinking, innovation, and critical thinking. They should spend more time in a group work and innovation. So that is in mind, and already in that direction work is going on. And already whether it is executive MBA, whether it is a 2-year full-time, the reduction has already happened. In AICT, we have done it, and even business schools are also doing a lot of options we are creating or we are giving. I think that is happening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your thoughts. It's always great to hear from you, and I thank you for that. I've been asked to talk a little bit as a moderator, my thoughts. I'll make it quick. I'm mindful of the time. So I'm also ISDSI G. I look after the Australasia region. So I want to give an Australasia perspective on the discussion. To be very honest, it's a New Zealand perspective, because my background is as an Indian industrial engineer from Kharagpur who came to New Zealand 25 years back and been teaching here in a university in management. So let me tell you 3 things which I've seen in my connection in my management education or management teaching in the Australasia region. I just want to focus on 3 things just to continue the fantastic discussion which we had from the 3 eminent speakers. First, I want to focus on curriculum. So as I said, I came from a very industrial engineering background, to a country, to do management, studies and teaching. What I saw was a shift from scientific to behavioral, So the curriculum which I saw in India was very scientific: management science, decision science, industrial engineering. From scientific to more behavioral, where the human being, the person, became very important in the management education. And what I'm seeing now is to more strategic. So that's the evolution in management education I saw, from scientific to behavior, and now to more strategic, and probably a mixed one as well. For example, if you look at the MBA curriculum in Australasia, MBA curriculum in Australasia has really changed. Most of the business schools have really changed. You don't see the fundamental, the usual subjects there. I mean, you look at Melbourne Business School, you look at Auckland Business School, you look at our own Victoria University of Wellington. We've changed the MBA totally. The curriculum, new subjects have come in: stakeholder management, systems thinking, more behavioral, more supply chain, rather than strategic operations, So things have changed. The curriculum itself has changed. I would put it from a scientific to more behavioral to strategic. Traditional subjects modified, traditional subject disappearing. That's the first thing I have seen, my humble experience. The second thing I see is delivery. And Mr. Shiva Kumar touched on that, the delivery. The word today is flexibility. The consumer needs flexibility. Most of the Australasian MBAs have become 1 year, and many others are becoming 1 year MBAs because we are forced to do that, because micro-credentialing, different exits, like Professor Metri said, these are all happening. There is a very, very interesting thing which is happening in New Zealand and Australia, which no university will accept. But the biggest thing, the biggest threat to management education is simple as this: students do not come to class. This is as simple as that. Nobody will agree this, but this is real. I had a colleague who went to the class, the first lecture for an undergraduate class. He had something like 100 students, and there are only 8 students in the class. This is real. COVID has given a lot of flexibility of learning. So the question I'm asking is lecturing the delivery mode? Is, teaching and learning associate deans across Australasia, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, including India, are also asking this question: is lecturing the thing, or we need to bring in something more than lecturing? So that question is being asked. And as Mr. Karnik said, the international competition has made the whole scenario different. A small country like New Zealand, we are so much influenced by the international sort of landscape. So not just Australia, but different parts of the world, including India, we get affected. So the international competition, the definition of international competition in management education has completely changed. Anybody can do any management education from anywhere. So the competition this has forced us to rethink about delivery. I think that's something which will evolve. What is the right delivery model for management education? The third thing I want to say is about research. What I've seen in my early days in Australasia context, the research used to be more positivistic. There is an objective reality. This is what we are going to do. That has changed dramatically. It has given to more interpretivistic. There are different people who think differently. The research paradigm itself has changed, and more constructivist research. A manager as a socially constructed human. So that idea, from a very pure positivist, very objective, survey-based, quantitative research to more qualitative, more interpretivistic research, more subjective, more constructive research. That research paradigm has also informed teaching, the so-called research-led teaching, that has also influenced management education. So just to summarize my thoughts from a very humble Australasian perspective, I would say curriculum changes is happening and will continue to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. The delivery, the questioning, like, is lecturing the right way to do? How should we teach? That question is going to come. Mr. Karnik talked about the artificial intelligence, the interaction between human. How are we going to realize that? That question is going to come. And thirdly, management research, I think, will take different shape. These are my 3 thoughts. But before I hand over to the MC, Professor Saloni Sinha, to handle the questions from the audience, I once again would like to thank all the 3 eminent speakers, Mr. Shivakumar, Mr. Kiran Karnik, and Professor Metri. Thank you very much. Over to you, Salini Sinha.
Thank you so much, and I'm feeling so rich. It's so much that I actually learned and heard from people. And last year, McKinsey released an article in August, and they were talking about the fundamental skills for career advantage. And they mentioned about growth mindset and curiosity mindset. And like Bhimaraya Metri sir said, learning to learn, learning to unlearn, learnability. And those are things that must come into our teaching learning environment. And I'm very glad to share that one of our project, our class, my students have done, and it was on curiosity, sir. It is accepted. It is a comic case, actually. We've done it for the first time, and it has been on an entrepreneur story. It is accepted in NACRA conference. We'll be presenting in September. So I think the students learn that way, and we as teachers also have moved out of that typical lecture mode, and we are also exploring ways to engage our students and growing together, because both the student and the teacher, post-COVID has given both of us a new start. We all have to reinvent ourselves. We both have faced the same situations. So I think bringing in compassion in the classroom, and so many things have to be taken care of. So mindsets are important. I'm always thinking about the word rock star faculty. Even in our earlier one of the panel discussions in an FTP, Metri spoke about rock star faculty. Today, Shiva Kumar sir has talked about rock starness and phenomena-based learning. I'm just really very happy to know that we have set a very good agenda for all the people involved in management education, curriculum design, and nurturing the skills of the products, like future ready products for the corporate world, and with visionaries driving the entire forum like this, Mr. Karnik and Dr. Metri, Dr. Shivakumar, Dr. Elias, Dr. Ravi Jain. I'm just waiting to see how this unfolds, and I'm 100% sure that we have set the first step very strong, and it's always going to be a bigger and a better journey ahead. Realization and introspection will help us take this ahead in the right way. So, I mean, it's so unfortunate that we have to conclude today, but nevertheless, we are excited that there's so much more, 5 or 6 or conferences and webinars and all these things will happen, and we are going to be there once again, listening and learning from all of you. I was just looking at certain comments, and everybody has appreciated, and I think everybody has taken back with them an agenda for themselves. So all the best to all the attendees, together with the vision that the stalwarts have given to us today, and powered by ASMA, the host of the day. We all will reinvent the education scenario of India, and so the global presence. We are waiting to capture that stage. Thank you so much. Yes, Rahul, you were saying something.
Sunny, let's invite Dr. Ravi Kumar Jain for vote of thanks.
Sure, sir. Yes.
Thank you so much, Saloni. Thank you so much, Rahul. Such a momentous occasion and such a interesting day. Thank you, Mr. Kiran Karnik, Professor Metri, and Shiv Kumar ji for having set the agenda for ISDSI so well, and you have given us so much of homework to keep the conversation going and strike more conversations with more stakeholders as we go about, not just in Indian context, but across the global context. I'm happy to share that the next couple of webinars will be powered by our American division as well as the Asia Pacific division, with 22 countries participating in that. I'm sure the thoughts that we're carrying from this webinar, especially what Mr. Karnik has suggested of how you look at the future, I think it has given us sufficient fodder, sufficient food for thought to keep the conversations going. Thank you so much, sir, and greatly moderated by Dr. Arun Elias. In fact, I must congratulate because we have started from the Pacific Ocean, and we will be moving towards the Atlantic Ocean as we move forward with our series of webinars. Many congratulations, Dr. Arun Elias, for such a eloquent and such a well-moderated session, and nicely laced with the perspectives from your part of the world. Thank you so much once again, ASMA. You are champion, guys. I don't need to really mention. You are champions of event management, champions of creating platforms and striking conversations. And Saloni ji, thank you so much. You are always been best. And as Professor Metri said, very difficult to find a communicator like you, well moderated, well conducted the session. Thank you so much. And I have my colleague, Dr. E.B. Khedkar from Pune. He is the Asia Pacific Vice President, in fact, championing almost 25 countries. Thank you so much, Professor Khedkar, for joining us. And all the audience, all the participants, I'm sure you have enjoyed the day, and keep looking out for this space. We are bringing out more excitement from the ISDSI Global Desk, along with our friends ASMA, And obviously, Saloni will be there as a part of the story.
Thank you,
And
sir.
we'll bring in more excitement in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Nice to meet all of you once again.
Thank you.
And hope
Kiran sir, namaskar. Such a
Namaskar.
joy to listen to you, sir. Such a joy.
Right. Thank you all. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Thank
so
you,
much.
Kiran sir, and thank you, Arun ji. I think it was a great session. Arun ji, your insights, as always, wonderful, sir. And Arun ji moderated extremely well, super moderation. And Saloni, I think, as always, I think she's a great communicator and moderator. Nobody can match her.
You're very kind, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So Rahul, great. Thank you very much. It is all Rahul's initiative and Rahul's idea. I think big hands to Rahul.
Yeah, sure. Thank you,
sir.
Rahul, for counting me in such
Thank you.
big
Thank you.
platform.
We may now close the session.